Hello everyone and welcome to Guild Wars 2 Daily. So today we're going to be talking about mechanics, and the footage in the background is the end of Guild Wars Insider's dungeon run. Thank you very much to them, and you guys can find a link to them in the description down below. Before we start though, a couple of things. Yesterday we were talking a lot about the gods in the lore episode. One thing was I mentioned the three sisters. I'm not sure why I thought it was sisters. It's the three queens. I messed up there. I saw somebody talking about that, and no, it's the three queens. That is who I was referring to. I didn't mean to confuse anyone. There are no three sisters. I don't know what it is. I just thought three sisters. But anyway, yeah, so that's what that was. And the other thing, I saw a comment that someone had left about a lot of the other gods, essentially, that have been mentioned in the Guild Wars universe. The reason I didn't mention them is that they're not actually canon, okay? A lot of the information you get from there comes from during Guild Wars Nightfall. ArenaNet had added lots of descriptions to various things and monuments, essentially, and landmarks that you could see in certain places of the game, but the only way to read those descriptions is to mine the data files that Guild Wars runs off of that really shouldn't be accessible to players. So they don't actually exist in-game, and ArenaNet have been asked before about these things, and there's so many cool insights and stuff, but ArenaNet have been asked whether the stuff we find in there is canon, and it's not confirmed that it is canon, sadly. So all that amazing stuff about the ancient spider god that potentially could have been the god before Abaddon, that you're quite clearly walking around on in one explorable area, and all that really awesome stuff, which is amazing, don't get me wrong. When I covered that when I was playing through Nightfall, I went over every single one of those little bits of information. It is really good, but it's not canon, so I didn't want to start going on about it because it's not something that will necessarily be true, and I wouldn't want to tell people that are new to Guild Wars and the Guild Wars universe stuff that's, you know, a bit iffy. So yeah, that's kind of that stuff. But yeah, today we're going to be talking about mechanics. The first question came from a personal message from someone called Codes, I think it was Codes anyway, who said, I've heard some of Jeremy Soul's music for the game, and in my opinion the cinematic scores are fantastic. However, I've heard from more than one source that the music during gameplay is noticeably bland or even boring. There's a large difference between simply having great music for a game and implementing it with good sound design. This may be a minority view, but to me the audio is just as important as the visuals of a game. Do you believe at this point in the development that this is cause for concern? I wanted to talk about music. I've been wanting to talk about audio quite a lot. I find it very important as well in games. I certainly do. I love that Jeremy Soul is the composer once again for Guild Wars 2, as he was for Guild Wars 1. A lot of people aren't aware of that, actually. He was working on Guild Wars 1 around the same time he was working on Oblivion, and it's really interesting to, particularly in pre-Searing Ascalon, you can walk around and listen to the music, and you could almost be in Cyrodiil at the time. It's so cool. But yeah, he's come back for Guild Wars 2. Honestly, it doesn't seem like there is that much variety in the way of the music. As you pointed out, it doesn't seem like there's that much variety there at the moment, and certainly when we're talking about an MMO, a game that we can end up sinking so much time into, yeah, that could be cause for concern. However, I don't think anyone should be too concerned about it. For me, and I'm sure for most players, we'll play for a while with something like an MMO, right? You'll want to get immersed in it, definitely, and MMOs typically aren't very good at immersing players in at all. And because of that fact, a lot of players never really bother with the music anyway. They might when they first start playing to get used to it, as I often do, but then quite quickly I think you'll find most people just mute the sound and then they start putting on their own music in the background. That's not to say, though, that the sound can get away and the music can get away with not having much variety or good quality. But we should point that out because that's probably going to affect how ArenaNet perceive how important it is to put good music into the game and a wide variety of music. So I wouldn't put it past them to not go all out on the Guild Wars 2 music. Guild Wars 1 always had quite a lot of good music, but then again, a lot of music was also written for Guild Wars 1 that never ended up in game. You can look, a lot of channels on YouTube have uploaded the soundtracks of the 3 Guild Wars campaigns and Eye of the North, and you can hear so many tracks on there that barely appear anywhere. They'll only be in like a cutscene every now and then, and particularly for Eye of the North and Nightfall, battle music was a big problem in Guild Wars 1. There was one battle music track, that was it, right, for those 2 releases. It was different in Nightfall and it was different in Eye of the North, but most of the content in Guild Wars 1 is fighting stuff, right? And it meant that you were always listening to the same battle music all the time, and it was just so off-putting. I'm really hoping that in Guild Wars 2 they don't end up doing that. You mentioned here, at this point in the development, do I think it's a cause for concern? No, not really, because we don't know how far away the end of the game's release is at the moment. Probably a lot of stuff still isn't voiced. There's probably still a lot of ambient noises and things that haven't been worked on. This certainly seems like something that could be worked on towards the end. Obviously, it's been something ongoing throughout development. I mean, you can look at when they first released that Guild Wars 2 trailer, they'd obviously already had some music scored for them at that point, but, you know, Jeremy Soule hasn't necessarily been slaving away. In fact, he's guaranteed not to have been since then making more music for Guild Wars 2. They'll have a rough idea of the amount of music they want in the game, and whether that's all been developed yet, I find unlikely. I doubt it has all been done yet, and even if more has been worked out and made, well, who's to say that they've gone back to implementing that into the actual game for the betas at this point? It might be a little bit bland in the betas right now, but this is certainly something I think, you know, we could see be improved. And then even if we don't see it improved to massive heights, there's always something to be said in what you're saying here about implementing good sound design. They can get away with having less music if they create a good music system. We don't always need to be hearing the music. I tend to find I can get far more immersed in the world if there is no music, if there's a really rich, good soundboard of background noises playing as you go through different areas in the game, and there's lots of different sound effects, not just in the combat, but, you know, the sound of birds during the day or crickets during the night. If that's really thick, if it can provide a lot of atmosphere without using music, then they can definitely get away with having music play more rarely during the game, so that the music doesn't get so old so quickly, and it adds something to the atmosphere when it's there, instead of eventually becoming something you kind of forget you're listening to, which I tend to find happens with a lot of games. And having said that, the background sound ambience we've been hearing about for Guild Wars 2 sounds like it's been done really well. People have been praising it. Those examples I just gave do happen in the game. Depending on where you are, the sounds might change. And also, depending on what time of day it is. Going back to music as well, that changes depending on what time of day it is. People have been saying you get very different music when you're walking around at night. I'm sure that the music will be split into different areas of the world, so you'll be hearing like the Asura theme if you're around Ratasum or the Tarnished Coast, and you'll be hearing more like the Norn theme has got to be in the game somewhere, and that'll probably be somewhere up in the Shiver Peaks or during key moments of the storyline. So I very much agree with you that good sound design can very much help Guild Wars 2 out in the department of not having that much music, and I hope ArenaNet appreciates that as well. Not so that they can use it as an excuse to have less music in the game, but just so that we get the best of both worlds, really. I'd like to see more music, definitely, but I can also see why it's not going to be so important and how it can be mitigated in other ways. But I'm keeping an eye on it, I definitely am. I can't wait to finally get into Tyria and completely immerse myself into it. Get all the sound levels just right. I'll probably be turning combat sound down. I'll probably have music a little bit quieter than the background audio, and just hopefully forget about the real world for a few hours and get really, really deep into it. That's what I'm hoping my experience will be, and nobody's complained too loudly about it so far, so hopefully that's an experience we can all have if we want it. The last question was asked by Sarephiel14, who said, do you think there'll be a minigame for each race? We know that the Norn have keg rugby, for example. I haven't heard anything about potential games for other races. I could see the Asura having some kind of pod racing. At least I hope so, because Polymock was a letdown for me, and I don't want to see it come back. Any thoughts? So this is the activities system, and it was something that was talked about a long time ago, but hasn't been appearing in any of the betas, clearly is unfinished, hasn't been worked on so far, so there hasn't been much talk about it. ArenaNet threw out numbers quite a while ago about how there'd be like 5 in each main city, and that's a pretty cool number, but seeing how they've worked so little on it right now, depending on how quickly they want to rush the game out, we might not be seeing that in the game at launch. It just depends on exactly when they're going to be working on it. Right now, all we've really seen is a few around Divinity's Reach, with the keg brawling, as you've talked about in Holbrack, and from interviews we've heard about some other ones. So, for example, there's snowball fighting we've heard about one called Smash 'em Up, we've heard about archery. The main one really that we've been seeing even since the demos is the target shootout in Divinity's Reach, but still I think nobody's been able to play that just yet. So they haven't been worked on that much, but to answer your question, yes, they definitely do seem to intend to have every main city have these activities in them, and I'm sure this will be one of the main reasons why players feel compelled to go to the cities and indeed walk around. I mean, the cities are so big, and ArenaNet have been nice to players by placing all of the services really quite close to one another, so these activities, I suppose, will be what spread players out around the cities and give us reason to go to, say, the different districts of Divinity's Reach. It's an exciting feature, but it seems to be one that not many people are talking about very much right now. You mentioned Polymock there. That was a mini-game in Guild Wars 1, and it had been mentioned by ArenaNet that really Polymock in Guild Wars 1 never ended up what they wanted it to be, and they were hoping to reimagine it in Guild Wars 2 and bring it up to something that would be a lot more fun and a lot more distinct. However, yeah, you say Polymock's a letdown and you don't want to see it come back. I think their plan always, if they were going to bring Polymock back, was that it was going to be different and it was going to be much more fun. I've always been very excited about seeing it come back and seeing it become what the original designer always wanted it to be, but ultimately failed because of the limitations of Guild Wars 1's engine. But we've not heard anything about Polymock. No, we've heard nothing about Polymock. No one's even asking about Polymock, really. When I went to Eurogamer and played the game, I actually meant to ask the developers, hey, what about Polymock? But I completely forgot to do it. I'm hoping that it's in the game, and I would love it if it was one of the Asuran mini-games, but it comes down to how many of these mini-games are actually going to end up having in there. I mean, they don't seem to have worked on them that much, and I'm wondering how long they're going to delay the release to get their original figure out. I mean, 5 in each town, that's no mean feat, especially when you consider Lion's Arch and Ebenhawk. Are these places going to have them as well? I mean, there are a lot of towns, a lot of cities. So, I mean, it's curious. I liked Polymock. I'd like to see it come back. But I wouldn't be surprised to hear that it'd been shunted to the side for some of these other activities. Activities certainly will be very fun. They look very, very cool. And they're really one of the only examples of PvP-style gameplay in certain situations outside of World versus World or competitive PvP. So it could be like with the target shootout, it certainly looks like it will be people competing for high scores. So not directly fighting one another, shall we say, but competing through scoreboards. So there's that. And then with the keg rugby, as you say, that's pretty much a sport, a non-sport right there. And you will be directly competing against other players, but in kind of a very different environment than the normal combat system will be showing you, or that you'll find in other areas of PvP. I'm looking forward to activities indeed, and I'm keeping an eye out for more information on them as well, definitely. But there we go, guys. Thanks very much for watching Guild Wars 2 Daily. Please feel free to leave any questions you may have down in the comment section below, and I guess I'll see you tomorrow.